The truck ground to a halt. "Home sweet home, maggot." A gun butt jammed into my bruised ribs, and I fell onto the pavement. Blood and mucus ran down my mouth, and I spat between clenched teeth. The inside of the hood smelled like rotten meat, like I was in my own world of death. "On your feet." Gloved hands squeezed my broken collarbone and hoisted me to stand. I wheezed and hacked up something that tasted like rusty iron. I shuffled along the pavement, the shackles on my swollen ankles and wrists only giving me a few inches of movement. There was a hole in the hood, and I could see a few things. Bright lights, guard towers, armed soldiers with dogs. 50 feet in front of me, the man in the bowler hat walked toward a large set of double doors. The doors opened as he stepped through, and the guards inside saluted him. The gun butt struck me again, and I picked up the pace. As I walked through the double doors, I could read what was printed on them. DRS 117. I stood naked in a fluorescent room while a guard sprayed me down with freezing water. He turned the hose off and laughed at my shriveling form. "Rat in a sewer," he said, and tossed me an orange jumpsuit. I was led to a cell the size of a closet and shoved inside. The heavy door slammed shut, and I looked around. The room was completely bare, save for a stone toilet in the corner and 4 surveillance domes in the ceiling. I sat down on the cold metal floor and put my head between my knees. "No sitting," a voice said from somewhere, and a jolt of pain seized my body. Electrical current ran through the floor, and I struggled back to my feet. I stood, paced, stood again for what must have been several hours. I tried to lean against the wall, but the floor zapped me again. My feet were numb. I staggered and swayed and fought to keep my balance. Finally, my legs gave out, and I collapsed on the ground. I braced myself for the pain. The door opened. "He wants to see you." 2 guards led me through a maze of brightly lit corridors. Men in lab coats and military uniforms hustled to and fro throughout the facility. When they passed by me, their eyes would dart downward, avoiding my gaze. We came to a long hallway with a door at the very end. As we approached, I saw another man in orange step out, flanked by his own set of guards. My vision was blurry and distorted, but there was something familiar about him. I squinted and focused as he drew nearer. "Brian." "Oh my God, Brian, are you okay?" I shouted as we passed each other. His head lifted, and I got a good look at him. His face was sunken and hollow, covered in bruises and fresh scars. His lips were white and cracked, and part of his ear had been torn off. But it was his eyes that frightened me. Dark and empty, the soulless eyes of a man being broken apart. He looked through me instead of at me, then turned his head back down. We entered a tiny room, and I was strapped to a metal chair. The man in the bowler hat stood with his back to me, facing the wall. There was a long silence. "The human animal," he said, "is a remarkable creature, not for his inventiveness or his reason or his ingenuity, or any of the other fabricated qualities for which he congratulates himself. No, the human animal is remarkable for one reason and one reason only: his sheer capacity to delude himself. Specifically, his ability to pretend that he is not an animal. He imagines that he is above the natural world, separate from it. He creates a fiction of laws and morality to convince himself that he's being closer to the gods than to the filthy earth. But man is not made of air. He is made of meat, and he screams when that meat is torn from him. He cowers when threatened and groans when beaten. Man is an animal like any other, and there is only one law that governs animals: the right of the strong to rule over the weak. He turned around. His pale, wrinkled face would look frail if not for the crazed fire behind his eyes. "You caused a lot of trouble for us, young man," he said, coughing into a handkerchief. "I don't like to have my time wasted, and you've wasted a lot of it." "Where's Lafarge?" I said. He smiled. "Lafarge never stopped working for us. He just stopped drawing a paycheck. His task was to find weaknesses in the operation, and he performed it admirably, even if he didn't realize he was helping us. Once we knew how the pill functions, we'll be able to develop the next generation of Stingrays so that nothing can keep us out of your heads. Of course, we still have some research to do, but we will learn all that we need to when we dissect his brain." I struggled to free myself from the chair, but the straps held me tight. "You son of a bitch!" I shouted. He stepped toward me and studied my face. "Please," he said, "call me Dreiser. You and I are going to be working very closely in the coming days. The pill's effects are still protecting you, but that's just as well. I'm going to be doing this the old-fashioned way." He gestured to one of the guards and took a rubber club from him. He raised it above his head and smashed it onto my left hand. Bones splintered and white pain shot up my arm. I clenched my jaw. I wasn't going to scream. He struck me across the mouth, and teeth clattered on the stone floor. He struck my knee, and the crack reverberated up my thigh. But I gave him nothing. I panted hard. "That all you got?" I said. He smiled. "Excellent. Truly excellent. I knew there was something special about you." He gestured to the guards. "That's all for now. Take him away." The guards unstrapped me and lifted me up. I hobbled to the door. As we left the room, Dreiser called to the guards. "Send his friend back in for another session." Electric pain jolted me awake. I had passed out, though I wasn't sure for how long. I scrambled back to my feet as the guards entered to carry me away again. They laid me out on a metal table with straps holding me secure. Dreiser sat next to me, softly running a hand through my hair. He held a handkerchief to his mouth and coughed into it for several seconds. "Phase 1 was the most difficult," he said at last. "The science was years behind where we needed it, and the most brilliant minds on the subject weren't exactly enthusiastic about the goals of the project. Nowadays, we can point the ray at them and make them do what we want. But back then, we had to use more traditional methods." He dipped a small needle into a dish of clear liquid and inserted it into my arm. Fire erupted in my veins and my whole body burned with blinding agony. My hands dug at the table until my fingernails cracked. After an eternity of screaming anguish, the pain subsided. "Phase 2 was relatively simple, by comparison," Dreiser said. "Our first field agents were experts in human psychology, but we soon learned that this was unnecessary. As I said, humans are animals. When they're hungry, they eat. When they're scared, they run. When they're angry, they kill. If you know what buttons to press, you can make them do whatever you like." "Stimulus," he said as he held up another needle. "Response." He inserted it into my arm, and I felt barbed wire in my veins again. My vision darkened around the edges, and the room started to float away. I thought I was dying, until the cold water splashed on my face, bringing me back to reality. "No, we didn't need experts," Dreiser said. "We only needed men with the strength to pull the trigger. Of course, the project was still far from complete. There remained the possibility of a mass movement too large for us to control. The same problem that confounded leaders from Caesar onward still plagued us. How do you break the mob's will once and for all? We were determined to press onward until we had solved the final equation of history. My lips moved in a breathless whisper. Dreiser leaned in and pressed his ear to my mouth as I struggled to make a sound. At last I was able to force out a few choked words. What is Phase 3? Dreiser laughed as he prepared another needle. My mind floated back from an unconscious void, and I slowly regained my senses. I was strapped into a chair again, sitting under a pool of light in an otherwise dark room. As the fog lifted, I became dimly aware of the presence of another person in the room with me. I'm sorry, baby. My head shot up. Lindsay, I called. Lindsay, where are you? She hobbled forward into the circle of light. Her head was shaved bald and a jagged scar ran over her scalp. Her arm was in a cast, and her left foot was twisted and bent. Jesus, Lindsay, I said, my eyes watering. Please believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. Dreiser, that fucking monster. He's doing it. He's doing all of it. Oh God, Lindsay. I'm so happy you're alive. She moved closer. Her eyes were soft and sad, and she gently touched my cheek. I'm so sorry, she said. It's okay, Lindsay. I'm sorry too. I know it wasn't really you. I know that Dreiser was the one who... She shook her head. No, baby. I'm sorry that I don't love you anymore. What? Dreiser stepped in from the shadows. There's nothing that you have that we cannot take from you, he said. Do you understand? Everything you own, everyone you love, even the things inside your head are ours to take or leave as we choose. He ran a finger down the nape of her neck. She closed her eyes and moaned softly. I will take things from you for as long as you fight me, he said. I will strip you down to nothing if I have to. I will carve you down until I find your soul, and I will smash it to bits. And then, when you are completely hollow, I will have a final task for you. His spotted hands ran up her arms, and she sighed. I shook my head. Lindsay, listen to me. You have to fight it. It's not you right now. He's inside your mind. He's making you do things that you don't want to do. Dreiser smiled at me as he unzipped her dress. She certainly looks like she wants to, doesn't she? He made me watch. I stood in my cell. He's trying to break me, I thought. He doesn't want information, even if I had any to give. No, he wants to conquer my mind. And he wants to do it without the ray. He wants to reduce me to a simpering puddle, and when I'm kissing his feet and pleading for mercy, only then will he kill me. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. He can torture me to the brink of death, and with my last ounce of strength, I will spit in his fucking face. If he kills me, he'll do it knowing that I defied him to the end. And if I can do it, others can too. We're the same, you and I, Dreiser said, pushing me down the corridors in a wheelchair. I scoffed. I'm nothing like you. Really? Mind control isn't new. Organizations all over the world have been practicing it for centuries, albeit in primitive forms. Psychological warfare, brainwashing, propaganda. And you, my boy, or a born propagandist. Or would you think we hadn't seen this? He handed me a tablet with a web browser open. I looked at the top of the page. Operation Stingray is in effect. God help us. It was really quite amusing, he said. You published your story for the public to read, believing you were striking a grand blow for freedom. You thought you could galvanize your readers to action and spark a mass movement to overthrow us. You believed you would change the world. He turned a corner and wheeled me down a long hallway. At the end was a giant steel door flanked by 2 armed guards. Printed on the door in huge bold letters were the words, Phase 3 Development. It's time for you to see something, Dreiser said. The doors opened, and we entered a massive dome-shaped room with a raised DS in the center. The DS had a semicircle of keyboards and control panels around it. I looked around and saw the inner surface of the dome was covered in hundreds and hundreds of dark monitor screens. Dreiser stepped onto the DS and tapped a key. One of the monitors lit up. It showed a young woman looking into the screen, applying makeup. A female voice was speaking softly. She spoke in rapid, broken sentence fragments, and she talked about her classes, her mother, the laundry, and a television show, all simultaneously. The image was odd. It was clear in the center, but fuzzy on the edges. It flickered dark every few seconds. Suddenly, it panned downward to show a bathroom sink. A hand picked up a tube of lipstick, and the image flicked back upward. The woman began applying the lipstick. I realized she was looking in a bathroom mirror. Was she wearing a camera somehow? It was almost as though I was looking through her. I gasped as I realized what I was seeing. Dreiser grinned. The first generation of Stingrays were quite limited, he said. They allowed us to transmit commands and little else. But the newest versions are wonders of technological innovation. Now, not only can we transmit whatever we like, but we can observe and manipulate all brain activity as well. He typed a command into the keyboard. The woman looked into the mirror, and her expression hardened. Her inner voice became grim and anguished. She said she hated herself. Her life was painful and meaningless. She would always be alone. The woman's face twisted, and a film of moisture distorted the image. She looked at a razor blade. She picked it up slowly with trembling fingers and held it to her wrist. Imagine, Dreiser said as the monitor faded to white. Stingray antennas covering every inch of the globe. Imagine countless minds at our disposal, ready and willing to perform whatever tasks we choose. Imagine wielding complete omniscience and omnipotence over all of humanity from this very platform. What is Phase 3? My dear boy, Phase 3 is nothing less than the power of God. He touched a key and the entire dome of monitors lit up. I looked through the eyes of people all over the world. A man shopping in a crowded market, a doctor performing an operation, a woman bicycling down a desert trail, a fighter pilot in the skies, an infant laying in a crib. You believe that you can lead the people in a revolution against us, Dreiser said. Tell me, what will you do when we have 6 billion cameras showing us everything we need to see? When every living creature serves us, and their thoughts become tools we use to enforce our will? What will you do when we delete the word for resistance from human memory with a keystroke? I stood in a white room. The world was thick and distorted, like I was underwater. Was I dreaming? Brian sat on the floor, near the opposite wall. His head was down and his hands clutched the back of his neck. I called to him, but the sound was lost in the curdled air. I ran to him, my slow-motion body heavy and aching. I called again. I needed to warn him about Phase 3 and the danger facing the world. I finally reached him, and he looked up. His eyes were completely black, and his face was a grimace of fear and pain. He shrieked like a frightened animal, and he bounded away on all fours. He cowered in the corner of the room and screamed. Dreiser's voice whispered in my ear. "Animals," he said. I walked to Brian and begged him to snap out of it. I searched his eyes for any trace of understanding or intelligence, any trace of my best friend. But his eyes held nothing but primal fear, the unthinking look of a beast in danger. The look in his eyes was like a claw hammer to my heart. He had been broken. He was gone. "You are alone," Dreiser said. I sank down to the floor. Yes, I was alone. Totally, helplessly alone. Dreiser was right. He had taken everything from me. Everyone I cared about. Every hope I had. Everything. No, not everything. I had one thing left. I had the rage that burned in my chest when I thought of his face. I had the image of his bloodied corpse that hung in my mind's eye like a mandala. I had my hate. I would find a way, somehow, to get my revenge on him. And if I couldn't, then I would kill him every time I closed my eyes. That was the one thing he couldn't take from me. The one thing that would be mine forever. "We've reached the end of our time together," Dreiser said. We sat across from each other, separated by a small table. My body was weak and quivering, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. He coughed and hacked into a handkerchief, and when he pulled it away from his mouth, I could see a reddish goo inside it. "I cannot break you," he said. "I have tried everything at my disposal, but still you defy me. The others have broken. Your lover, your friend. Even Lafarge begged for his life in the end. But no matter what I do to you, it only hardens your resolve. I can see it in your eyes that your fury cannot be extinguished. It sustains you. It keeps you whole." He leaned forward. "But anger is a lie, my boy. It makes you feel strong in moments when you are most weak. No, it's time for you to learn something about the true nature of power." He pulled a gun from his hip and placed it on the table. I laughed in spite of my aching ribs. "That's it? You're going to kill me? Be my fucking guest." "But do it, knowing that you couldn't beat me, you bastard." Dreiser grinned and shook his head. "You misunderstand me, son. This isn't an execution. This is a job interview." He stood up and walked over to me. He unfastened the straps on my arms, and he sat back down. "The human animal is weak," he said. "Weak of body, weak of mind, and above all, weak of will. He tells himself fairy tales about the indomitable strength of the human spirit, because in his heart he's ashamed of his weakness. He knows that he will crumble if placed under the slightest bit of pressure." I lifted my shaking hands from the straps and rubbed my wrists. "But you, my boy, you are different. I saw potential in you from the very beginning. A fighter's spirit, a fierce survival instinct, An iron will that can withstand any attempt to destroy it. I placed my hands on the table. Just the kinds of qualities I've been looking for in my replacement. I looked at the gun. This line of work takes its toll over time, and I don't have it in me to see Phase 3 to completion. We are on the cusp of a new day in history, and we need a leader with the strength to pull the species forward triumphantly into the glory that awaits. I touched the gun with a trembling hand. The parasites in this facility are worthless. Yes, men and bureaucrats. Spineless worms who couldn't wield true power without a memorandum telling them how to do it. Now we need a god king, a pharaoh. Someone with the vision and the will to reign over the churning masses, like Poseidon over the seas. I felt the gunmetal warm to my touch. Someone who knows how to kill without mercy. I closed my hand around the grip. All great men have a virtue they cling to above all others. For some it is honor, for some it is love, for you it is vengeance. You will be the God of the Old Testament, raining punishment upon the wicked and cleansing fire. Your hate will light the way. I lifted the gun. It feels good, doesn't it? The power! Imagine wielding this kind of power over billions! That is your destiny, my boy. This is what awaits you. I touched the barrel of the gun to his forehead. Yes, that's it! I remember now. I remember the first real taste of power I held over another human being. I cocked the hammer back. I had the exact look that you have right now. My hand was steady and calm. That very same look. Boom. It's amazing what a shower, a shave, and a filet mignon can do for your outlook on life. I looked up from the Phase 3 controlled DS at the dark world of monitors. I reached my bandaged hand to the controls. The doctors had patched me up and injected me with something to take care of the pain in my broken body. I had them thrown in the prisons afterward, along with half of the facility. Anyone who so much as looked at me while I was in custody would be getting an important lesson about loyalty. Technicians were working on Brian and Lindsay, trying to reconstruct their minds from the mush that Dreiser had reduced them to. They were making progress, though it would be a while before they were at full mental capacity. They asked me if I would want them back as they were, or if I wanted to make any improvements. Mostly as they were, I said. Maybe make Brian a little less caustic, and give Lindsay more of a sense of humor. And they both should probably lose any negative associations they may have with the project, now that things have changed. I touched the control panel and the monitors lit up. Dreiser was wrong. I would prove that. Phase 3 is an incredible tool, a tool that could be used for the betterment of all humanity. I could end war, poverty, and suffering for all time. I could lead us into a paradise, a perfect world free of want or fear or death or any thoughts that could cause pain. Dreiser wanted to use it for evil, but I would change the world for the better. No, he was wrong. I'm nothing like him. Nothing. I looked at the monitors, a world of minds ready and waiting to receive my input. I looked around me, and I smiled.